No, so what I'm trying to say is that obviously you hear all these buzzwords all the time, right? But what I think is you as a manager or anyone as a manager or mid senior level onwards need to understand to define that fine line that okay, this is what is going to help my organization and this is what is not. And what is more important is the timing of it. That this was, I mean, just because somebody else implemented it just doesn't mean you need to implement it. You never know what kind of problem they were ready to solve. You don't know the prerequisites for it. So whenever I hear about a new technology or something, I try to just see two things in it. One, how can I apply to my any of the problems that I am solving currently? Can it be applied? Number two, do I have the prerequisites to leverage it? So because what happens is sometimes just because somebody has automated or let us say implemented something, if you start implementing and copying or proposing that, it can go wrong. I mean, there is definitely a maturity curve that everybody has to go through. So I mean, I see things like that. So for example, recently I had been to NITIE again for recruitment, and I saw all the CVs without doubt had AI ML certification written on it. So that made me really think. And one of my colleagues here in my organization, who's a good friend of mine, always tells me, "You should learn Python. You should learn Python." And so I don't want to be a coder. I didn't want to be a coder. That's why I did MBA. I mean, I don't want to be doing that. But when I saw when I met the folks, and they are like what, half a decade younger than me, and when I met them at NITI, right? So and they are talking about this, so then that is when I felt that yes, and I was basically probing them on applications of these things in supply chain. So almost those conversations convinced me that yes, I think I need to be able to understand Python as a language. For example, I don't want to be an excellent coder at it. I just want to understand what is possible in it and how
So
it is
somebody does
useful.
not like fool you.
Yeah, no, no, one does not fool you. That is the second part. The first part is so that you are able to guide them. Because
Yes.
if you have a, let us say, IT business partners or analytics business partners, they are good at coding. But if you are not able to guide them, how will they code? I mean, you need, so I think those, you can have those intelligent conversations with people. I think if you understand these things.
Okay, given that you have rightly you brought it down to NITIE, etc. So let's look at when you actually went and hired people over there, right? I mean, now you have been working for about 5 years there, I mean,
Yeah.
almost half a decade, as you said. What are the things which you now look for from graduate straight out of an MBA college? He's an MBA fresh graduate. What are the type of things which you feel that this a graduate in this day and age, especially in the supply chain domain, should have?
So one thing which I look at and which and I'll tell it in the order of my preference. One thing is, and it's not related to supply chain. I look at drive. I mean, in terms of whether that person has a drive to do something. I mean, it could be anything. It could be football. It could be supply chain. It could be coding. It could be going and being organizing a B School Fest, because B School Fest is not a small deal. I mean, it's
Yes.
almost crores. The budget goes into crores. So has the person demonstrated drive that given an opportunity, he has that? And again, go back to saying hunger, because that is what ultimately drive and hunger are connected. So does the person have that drive to get things done? So that is the first thing that I look at, because what I believe, and I could be wrong, and this is my personal belief, that will is always above skill. I mean, especially for fresh graduates, right? I mean, if the will is there, you can skill them. If the will is not there, the skill can't just help them. So I think I put will above skill. So that is one. Second, obviously, the good thing is, because you are going to NITIE, etc. So you expect the person to have a certain amount of aptitude.
Yeah.
So that is for given. Second, what you try to look at is how do they think about solving any problem. So if you give them small caselets or case studies, how they go about solving those things, so that generally I use something, some problems which are existingly we are facing, but you don't add the real constraints to their problems. You just tell them, okay, that if you want to solve this, how would you go about thinking about it, right? I mean, so these kind of things. So I think these are the three key things that I think are very important.
Okay, now that you have again go back to your college days, there are a lot of times when people say that if you have used about 10 to 15% of what you studied in college, basically your education was useful. Given the type of work that you do, I'm sure you would be using much more than what it was. So roughly tell us, like, I mean, you did start off in the beginning saying that you were a fresh person straight out of college. So tell us a little bit more about what are the key subjects which you learned in college which have actually helped you in the last 5 years.
On that, I think in the initial years, I mean, initial couple of years, I think the theoretical or academic learning which I had used at least somewhere or the other, definitely. But I think now over a period of time, it's using more on the experience of last 5 years than going back to the textbooks. Also, I can't pinpoint of any subject in a whole, because a subject is very broad. I mean, that way, when you start to think about it in your role will be solving, let us say, making a process leaner. So that time you just need to use the lean principles that you had learned about, the Six Sigma lean principle. That's what you need to learn, right? So you may not apply the overall subject as well. You might apply some of the techniques that were taught. So things like value stream mapping becomes very important. The way to design process and make it leaner, understanding of that, especially in supply chain, becomes important. Then second thing obviously is around how is the interaction with systems, being able to understand that, because supply chain today goes hand in hand with technology. So you need to be comfortable with understanding the business side of systems, that way. So I think these are the 2 3 things which I used personally,
So okay, so
which I
just
learned.
to name a few things which, if you want to say it out, some of the things which you felt like were underrated in college, but actually are used much more than what you think in day-to-day businesses.
There is,
Couple
I
of
think,
subjects, couple of subjects, yeah.
one I would tell you, which I don't know, you cannot structurally apply it honestly in your work, but organizational behavior is a subject which everybody learns in
That
HRM.
everyone sleeps in the college, but
Everybody
actually,
sleeps,
yeah.
but I mean, that is what your life is going to be. It's going to be organizational behavior. It's not going to be anything else. You could learn anything after that. But yeah, the hard part is you can't apply directly, because sometimes you may not have that influence, and obviously, situation is real, right? I mean, it's not a controlled environment. So, but I think one of the things that really, really, really is super important
I mean,
is
we have done
understanding the
this session
business.
with other people also, and that's their experience also. Like,
Yes,
first thing, I
yes.
mean, everyone said, like, oh, I should have probably paid a little bit more attention in organizational behavior class. I don't
So
think
if
there
you
is
ask
any.
me,
Yeah, I don't think there is any college where organization behavior is very interesting. But when you actually go and study I mean, use it in the day-to-day life, you realize the importance of that particular
no, no,
subject.
definitely.
Okay.
I cannot talk more about. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so given that you work in retail, and one of the parts of here is basically, especially in the type of retail that you work in, your stores, your shops, etc., should be open on the days when people are actually having a holiday, right? I mean, like,
Yeah,
for example, I will go shopping only when I get out of work or get out of college,
yeah,
right? So usually it's weekday evenings or weekends. That's the time when it is open. Whereas the rest of the world is actually, sometimes you have to be on,
yeah.
sometimes you have to be on call when the rest of the world is actually enjoying themselves. Like, for example,
Exactly.
Christmas, New Year also will be a sort of like a peak time for you.
Peak
So
time. Yeah.
does that affect you also, or like, do you think that your work life balance is reasonably better?
I mean, again, I think the two questions. So one, my individual role at least does not deal with the day-to-day operations, so it doesn't affect me much. What affects me much is my project milestone. So whether my project milestone is coming in Christmas, Diwali, Eid, or anything, that I mean, that is like 7 day week for me.
Okay.
Because I work more on the project side of things, I mean, not
Mhm.
more into day-to-day operations. But yes, talking about folks who work on day-to-day operations like DC managers or DC supervisors or transportation managers, for them, yes, during this time they have to be available, if not physically, at least
On a
remotely,
call.
that availability becomes on call or something, that becomes very important. And also this goes back to building people, right? I mean, if you have built a great team who can take care of these things, who know how to deal in such things, who have like a playbook that, okay, if this thing happens, I have to do this. So if you do that, you will get lesser calls. So I think one of the things that is good is building your team. If you have built your team, you can sleep peacefully.
And this is the place where documentation actually comes into way, right? I mean, like, you actually have to not only train, you also have to document the problems, etc., so that
Yeah.
it
Yes.
actually
So
frees
those are
up it
the
actually frees up your time more than anything
Yeah,
else.
yeah, but you don't do it just for you. You also, because organization has to work with or without you, right? I mean, so you have to build people. And I mean, again, in my last 5.5 years experience, I have realized that the more you develop people, the more you also get developed, right? I mean, because then you also get little freer that way. And coming back to your point of work-life balance, so I honestly feel, and we also talk about it a lot in office, etc. I think work-life is a misnomer. I mean, whoever coined it really didn't like his work, because if you look at it, that person is saying work is different and life is different. Means there is no life in work. So I mean, I don't like that phrase, but I would like to
Would you
say
consider
that
yourself to be a workaholic, or according to your friends, would you consider yourself to be a workaholic?
no, not really. Not
Okay.
really. So the way I see it is, see, your life is, I mean, your work is a subset of your life, right? You have life, you have family, you have friends, you have XYZ things to do, etc. So work is one of that. So you have to imbibe in its whole. And if you are present at every moment consciously, and if you are happy about it, and you are doing the right thing for yourself and the stakeholder, and that stakeholder could be your wife, could be your mom, could be your boss, could be your subordinate, whoever. If you're doing right, and if you're happy at what you are doing, I think you will find peace of mind even if you are taking a call at 8 p.m. But for me personally, I don't think I'm a workaholic as such, because on a need basis, yes, you have to do it if it is necessary. But that's why again it goes back to what organization you're working for, right? So in case sometimes we have to work on Saturdays for any reason, for example, maybe on call, maybe go to office, etc. But that is when these flexi hours and kind of concepts really help you. So when your management sees that, okay, this person has been there whenever needed, so even if you go one day out 1 hour earlier, nobody's going to ask you anything, right? So you have a way to balance it out. So I don't think work life balance exists today. I mean, it is not about being existing, that it's a misnomer. I think it's a old concept now. Especially with WhatsApp. WhatsApp is the biggest, I would say, the
The
biggest,
time eater.
thing, who has basically cut this divide, because now you can reach anybody, anywhere, anytime. So
Okay. Okay. So we'll call this an interview. We'll call this session close right now. I mean, like, thank you very much for joining in. It was great pleasure. I mean, at such short notice that you are actually able to join in. Guys, do subscribe to this channel. Do look at Sushanth's LinkedIn profile. You can probably connect with him in case you want to. And he replies. Don't bug him on a weekday. Friday and Saturdays are the best days for it, because Fridays and Saturdays are off times in Dubai. Okay, thank you very much, Sushanth, and till we
thank
meet
you,
again
Vivek,
next
for
time.
having me. It
Goodbye.
was a pleasure.